Let's talk about what happens when liberal ideology collides with reality, when compassion becomes a political buzzword and not something that we actually do, and cruelty becomes the outcome. Because the numbers are in and they're devastating. Metro Vancouver just released its latest homelessness count. Brace yourself. 5,232 people are now living without homes. That's a 9% spike from just last year. Even worse, the number of people sleeping rough on sidewalks, in tents, in vehicles jumped 30%. More tents, more needles, more lives shattered. And no, it's not because the weather's nice. It's not a blip or a trend. This is what it looks like when liberal immigration policy and NDP drug policy team up to annihilate the most vulnerable people in the country. Let's start with immigration. Nearly 2 million newcomers flooded into Canada last year. 2 million. Not enough hospitals, not enough shelter beds, not enough detox beds, just more demand, more pressure, more chaos. Even BC Premier David Eby, Mark Carney's best provincial friend, if you're not counting Ontario's Doug Ford, warned last year that the province was drowning under the weight of Ottawa's immigration targets.
In British Columbia, we're seeing unprecedented population inflows from immigration generally, from a number of different categories. Temporary residents, as well as more traditional streams of immigration, as well as asylum seekers. So we're talking about well in excess of 10,000 people a month. Our most recent total for last year was 180,000 new British Columbians. And that's great, and that's exciting, and it's necessary, and it's completely overwhelming. To add a new city of 180,000 people every year to our province is not sustainable. Our schools are full. We are unable to keep up with housing starts, despite significant and record-setting rental housing and housing for purchase starts. And so in the communique, and one of the things we've been talking about around the table is how do we link up our immigration targets and the federal government's immigration work with the reality on the ground of what we have capacity for. And so it's a much larger conversation than asylum seekers, which I understand is front of mind in Quebec and Ontario. But we don't want to lose the overall picture of how dramatically a population is growing, certainly in British Columbia, and the impacts that that's having on the ground in terms of our ability just to keep up.
But what did Ottawa do? Well, the Liberals pushed harder on the gas because the results don't matter to these people, only the headlines do. Then there's the NDP's drug decriminalization disaster. You've probably heard the spin. Safe supply, harm reduction, destigmatization. Sounds nice in a university sociology class, but in practice, in reality, it's fentanyl in the playground, meth on the SkyTrain, and overdose deaths at record highs. Public drug use was legalized, and then, shock of all shocks, they had to reverse it because, as it turns out, giving junkies heroin and telling police to stand down doesn't actually help anyone. They didn't get clean, they didn't get jobs, they didn't go back to their families, they didn't get safe, they got dead. And that safe supply killing Albertans right next door as it's sold into the streets here, while the Alberta government focuses on a recovery-based approach, a full 180 from BC's permissive, deadly madness. And while these people were dying, billions in taxpayer dollars were spent enabling it, buying the drugs, handing out syringes, and subsidizing the slums we've decided to call housing. This is what they call compassion. Government-funded addiction and imported poverty. What could possibly go wrong? Meanwhile, Indigenous people, who make up a disproportionate share of homeless populations, are once again abandoned. 54% of Indigenous respondents in the Metro Vancouver count were completely unsheltered. So much for reconciliation. You want to talk about injustice? How about this? Veterans sleeping in their cars while the government builds welcome centers for newcomers who just got here last Tuesday. Seniors choosing between rent and groceries while the federal government bankrolls a national pharmacare plan for illegal drug users. This isn't a housing crisis anymore. It's a policy crisis. It's built on arrogance, fueled by ideology, and enforced by politicians who wouldn't last 5 minutes walking through the downtown east side. This is what happens when the government forgets its own people, when the Ottawa Liberals flood the system and Victoria New Democrats empty the jails, when progressives decide the way to save lives is to hand out dope, not help and hope. The result? Encampments, overdoses, shattered families, and a nation spiraling toward the kind of urban decay we used to pity in documentaries. It didn't have to be this way, but as long as the Liberals and their NDP lapdogs are in charge, expect more of the same. More slogans, more excuses, and more Canadian lives destroyed by compassion. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. It doesn't have to be this way, but progressive policies are destroying Canadian municipalities. To sign our petition and send a message, please go to fixourcities.com.